Let's look at how to add sprites, background image sprites to the Amoeba Amigos website. So what I want to do is in the navigation link here, you can see there's this triangle. So I want to make this triangle a sprite because there's two colors there. And then down here, I want to put these triangles into the sprite also. So if we look in my image folder here, this is 4 images. And I want these 4 images to be in one sprite. So let's go into Photoshop and let's make a new image. Let's call it triangles. Let's just call it triangles. And I'm not going to worry too much about the dimensions right now until I get all the images in. So I'm going to go File, Place, and I'm going to go and find those 4 images that I want. All right. So these are the 4 that I want right here. There's one of them. Let's just drag them. It'll be easier. Let's drag them in here. Okay, so here's my 4 images. Let's zoom in. Let's sort of position them the way we want. So let's have the 2 right-facing ones beside each other. And I'm going to turn on transformation controls here so we can sort of see where they are, sort of see their box sizes. So there's my 2 right-facing arrows, and then let's move the left-facing arrows or the downwards-facing arrows together. So ideally, when I'm doing sprites, I snap them together like this, and then I move them over 2 or 3 pixels away from each other. So let's go with 3 pixels, and I'm going to move these up so they snap in with these ones, and then I'm going to move them down 3 pixels. So 1, 2, 3, like that. And now I'm just going to do some alignment here, because I want everything to be nicely lined up. All right, so those are aligned to the left. And these, let's align them to the left. Okay, so here is my sprite sheet. Let's crop this out so that it's nice and tight. So now I've got these 4 images in the sprite sheet here. I'm going to zoom in even more, and I want to do a little bit more accuracy here on these. I'm going to take these and I'm going to move them to the top right-hand corner so it makes my calculation much easier. And I'm going to just crop even more here until I get a nice tight sprite sheet, because I don't want to create it any wider than I have to, so I'm just wasting space, wasting file size. Okay, so here's my sprite sheet. Let's save this, and let's save it as save for web. So I'm going to save for web, and I want to make sure that I have a transparent background, so I'm going to choose PNG here. And I'm going to put it into the same folder as triangles.png. So there we go. So I've saved my sprite sheet into my images folder. The next thing I want to do is probably figure out where these triangles are located. What's their sort of coordinates? So there's a couple different ways we can do this. In Photoshop, we can use the ruler and sort of create rulers at the right position. So if we, looks like we'll have to turn off snapping here. Let's turn off the snapping. And so I'm going to create a ruler, and you can see that these ones line up at 18 pixels. So that's going to be our first coordinate. And then if we're moving down, our images line up at 15 pixels. So 18 pixels in and 15 pixels down is sort of the 2 coordinates that we need to know. So I should probably write that down. Let's put them on the images here so we don't forget. So arrow right is 18 pixels from the top, and, 18 pixels in and 15 pixels down. So I'll just write that there so I know exactly where it is. So arrow right then is 0 and 15. Put commas in there. All right, so these are kind of the background positions that we need. And the last one that we care about here is the downward arrow. And so that is horizontally, it's at 18, and it's down 0. Okay, so there's my positions for my sprites. Okay, so let's go and look at our HTML. If we look in Chrome, you'll see that we have this triangle image here, And if we look in our HTML, you can see it's probably just a background image in our CSS. So let's concentrate on the nav right now. So that's nav btn. So I'm going to go and look in my CSS here for the nav btn. So that's right here. You can see we have nav btn, and we have two images. So when it's in its standard state, we have the off arrow, and in its hover state, we have the on arrow. And right now, these background images are directly on that element. But we are going to be, when we're using sprites, we can't put them directly on that element because it doesn't give us enough control over positioning the background image. So what we want to do is go to our HTML here, and we'll just create sort of a dummy element that we can put our sprite into. And I'm going to use the I element here. I'll give it a class of sprite, like that, and then I'll just close it. So we don't need anything inside it, it's just our Sprite class. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my CSS here, and let's go somewhere. Let's go right here, and I'm going to make my Sprite class. So what I want to do, let's set it to position absolute. So that makes sense in this situation because we want to be able to move it around. We'll go right, I don't know, I'm just going to sort of guess right now, 5px. And then we want top to be 50%, and then the margin top to be negative, however high we want this image to be. So if we go look in here, the original images for down was 14 pixels high, so we're going to go negative 7px. So doing this little trick here by putting the top at 50% and the margin top at negative half the height, we can actually center it in the element. Then we want to give it a width. So our width is something. Our width is whatever that is right there. 15px wide. All right, 15px. And then our height is 14px. And let's just put a background color on it so we can see where it is on our page. Okay, so there we go. So let's go to Chrome, and here it is right here. Not particularly where we expect it to be, right? So it's not really where we want it to be. Okay, so that means that our nav btn probably isn't set as a positioning context. So let's set it to position relative. All right, there we go. So now you can see the red icon holder. It's just a holder for the icon right in there. It's not quite in the best position, but we'll move it around in a second. The next thing we want to do is let's just keep the background color on there for a second, but let's put our background image on here too. So I'm going to put my color back in. I'm going to delete that other one in a second. So this is ../img/triangles.png. We want no repeat, and we want left top. Okay. There you go. So there's our sort of triangle that we're looking for. And that's the current triangle, the one that we can see in Photoshop at position 0, 0. So if we look in our code, right here, our background position is left and top. That essentially maps to 0, 0, so the coordinate 0, 0 on our background image. So this will look exactly the same in Chrome. We'll see no difference here. Okay, so now that we have this one in place, we can go and we can remove it from here. So we don't need anything related to the image in here anymore. All we want is our background color. So I'm just going to put background color in here. And the same thing here, we just want background color. And we're going to get rid of the image. Okay. All right, so that's pretty close. We just need to make some minor adjustments to the position. So let's put the right at 8px. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe 10 even. All right, so our sprite is in the right location now. The only thing we need to change is when we hover, we want to change to the other image. If we look in Photoshop, we have the off state here, and then we have the on state here. And if we remember our coordinates, that's at 18 pixels in and it's 0 pixels down. So in order to display that sprite image on hover, we just want to change the background position. So we know that that image is 18 pixels in, which means if we want to display it on our sprite, we have to move our image negative 18 pixels. So it's going to be negative 18 pixels, and it's still at the top, so that's 0. Let's go check this out. So when we hover now, it doesn't look like it's moving, changing colors. It's hard to say on that one. Did I spell everything properly? Just like it. All right, let's just go in Photoshop here, and just for a second, let's make this a real crazy color change to see if it's actually working, because the color I think is a little bit too subtle for us to actually see whether it's working or not. All right. All right. Okay, so it's not actually working. So why is that, we wonder, right? Why is that not working? And that's because in here, we're targeting only the BTN itself to change the position, and we're not targeting nav BTN sprite element. So let's target the sprite element directly. So that's .sprite, because that's the thing we actually want to change the image on. And we'll take this position and we'll put it on the sprite element just like that. And let's try this again. There we go. So all we're doing for this sprite is we're just moving the background position around on our element. Okay, so let's go back here. I'm just going to get rid of this color effect. And we'll do another save for web. And then we'll look at the next element. So the next ones that we want to target are at the bottom here, these triangles down here. So these ones also have sort of the hover effect state in them. So we want to use generally the same idea. So we're going to go back to our navigation at the bottom, and we're going to put the icon thing in it, the icon element. So we'll go I class equals sprite. Okay, so we already have some HTML related to the, or some CSS related to the sprite. So if we go back to Chrome right now and refresh, you should hopefully see that there is something there, unless I didn't save it. Okay, so where are those? Let's go back to Chrome. Where are those things? Oh, they're up here. Oh, so again, it's our positioning context, right? So let's go back to here. We'll search for nav main. And we want to search for the links right here. Let's turn them into a positioning context. So position relative, okay. And we probably don't need any background on them, so we'll just delete the background. And let's go check this out now. There we go. So our icons are in here, but you can see we have this funny effect. I guess it's an effect. It's because right here in our hover state, we're changing the background image, which we don't want to do anymore. So let's go back to this. So there we go. We have our icons in place now. They look exactly the way we want because they're the same as this one up here. It's the same class. The only thing that we need to change is the hover state. So the hover state isn't working yet. So we need to do that same sort of idea, but we want to change the hover state on the sprite. All right. Now, one thing you may have noticed is that this one is pointing down and these ones are pointing down also, but we want those to be rightwards pointing arrows. So that comes down to our positioning. So what we want to do is also change the position when it's just in its standard link format. So we're just going to change this to the standard when it's not being hovered over, and we want to change the position here and then also on hover. So let's go background position So our horizontal position for this triangle here, that's rightwards facing off, is 0, and so we're going to put 0. And then it is at 15 pixels down, so that means we want to go negative 15 pixels here. Okay, so let's check that out. Okay, so we have rightwards facing arrows, and then we just want to change our background position on hover. And so we want that to be, that one is negative 18, negative 15. So negative 18 px, negative 15 px. And there we go. So there it's changing on hover. So that is the effect we're going for. We've effectively replaced 4 images with just 1 image. The only thing we have left to do here is get rid of this red. I'm just going to go back up to Sprite. And we'll get rid of the red. There it is right there. So we want to change that to transparent. Okay, cool. And now that we've done that, now that we've used our sprites instead, we can go in here and we can delete these 4 images because they're no longer needed. We're only using this triangle sprite. Now, sprites generally only work in situations like this where you have a unique icon. You would never want to do a sprite for the stripes or the lines because we're using repeat. You can only generally use sprites when you're not using repeat unless you really pay attention to your elements and stuff like that. If we're looking at the superpowers section right here, it would probably be appropriate to put all of these elements in sprites also. That would be a good solution, except that I'm using SVGs. So I decided to use SVGs instead of sprites in this situation, but you could of course put those into sprites if you wanted. So sprites then, you create 1 image like we've done right here, and then you move that background image around within an element using background position to sort of display only one of the images at a time.